this event is being recorded. I'm Jenny Williams, Associate Director for the Archives of American Art at the Smithsonian Institution, and I hope that you had a wonderful summer. We're thrilled that you are joining us for lunch, which I am enjoying here at our headquarters in Washington, D.C. The Archives of American Art Gilbert and Ann Kinney New York collector, Mr. Jacob Proctor, will soon join us. We'll feature the newly acquired papers of artist Roberta Allen. A few housekeeping items though before we get started. At any time during the webinar, you can submit your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the control panel on your screen. Closed captioning is available. You can access captions by clicking the CC button on the right side of the control panel. We're also excited that the artist Roberta Allen can join us. So Roberta, as Jacob presents items and we have a discussion, please feel free to chime in, and thank you so much for joining. Now, I'd like to welcome and introduce my colleague, Jacob Proctor. Jacob?
Thanks, Jenny, and welcome everyone. I'm in our New York office at in Gramercy, and I'm excited to be presenting or exploring, and presenting is really going through and looking at some interesting things from Roberta Allen's papers, which we acquired a couple of months ago. So Roberta Allen, hello Roberta, is joining us via the chat today. Is a conceptual artist, working mostly with the relationship between language and perception, and was quite prominent in the conceptual art world of the 1970s, into the early 1980s, at which point she shifted away from making visual art toward writing, and had a whole other career as a writer, which continues to this day. And this is a case where, we acquired her art-related archive, and so she still has her writing-related archive, and perhaps one day that will find, hopefully that will find an appropriate institutional home as well. So during the 70s, Allen showed basically for more than a decade with John Weber Gallery in New York, which was a real epicenter for this kind of work. Also with galleries like Franco Toselli in Milan, and Kiki Meyer-Hahn in Dusseldorf, which were sort of also sort of nodes within this kind of international network of conceptual art. And we'll see sort of a little bit of that playing out throughout the program. I'm going to switch my camera here. So here I just pulled, these are just a few announcement cards for various exhibitions. There's four shows at John Weber, and then this is a show at PS1 when it was still the Institute for Art and Urban Resources, which was a kind of extension of the Weber show from earlier in that year. This is a particularly strong archive in the sense of studio material. There's a great amount of wonderful preparatory materials in this collection. And so one of the things I thought would be kind of nice to do is to walk through. I realized as I was going through it that you can really trace like a lot of sort of like from step by step, the development of different works. So I thought it might be kind of interesting to look at something like that. So Allen became kind of particularly well known for photo text combination pieces, which also involve a kind of performance. And I'll show you how that works. And she would take these photographs originally in a photo booth, like a photo mat kind of a situation. And so she would, she would perform essentially for the automated camera. And so let's switch back over. So we have first, this is for this series, which is called Pointless Acts. She would kind of storyboard the performance in terms of sort of figuring out what she was going to do and what the poses needed to be and what the choreography would be. And then here's another series. This is great because it's actually done on a planner, so we know exactly precisely when this was happening. This is a series called Negations, where she says she's dealing with the possibilities of 3 dimensions in 2 dimensions, or of representing 3 dimensions in 2 dimensions. And so you can see here, she's kind of planning out, drawing a line in front of a negated surface. And then she would go into the photo booth and sort of pose herself however she needed to. These are actually from a couple of different related series. So they're not all exactly the same. And then she would start drawing. She would draw directly onto the this photo booth pictures. And then those would then get mounted on smaller cards, and then a description. So here's one without the description yet. And then this of what's happening, drawing a line between 2 negating lines, canceling out part of a negated surface. This one looks like maybe it's one that didn't work out. And then they would get either blown up, to something more like this size, rephotographed and enlarged and exhibited, in a context like this. This is an exhibition of the Pointless Acts works at Gallery Meyer-Hahn in Dusseldorf in 1977, I think. Or they would sometimes be turned into an artist's book, for example. Sometimes this is like one sort of example of how this could work. These aren't those, but it's a different one. These are also actual photographs of a negated place where she's put tape on the windows. So this is it's really great in terms of being able to kind of reconstruct her process.
Mm-hmm.
And I should say that, if anyone has questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat. I can't really monitor it myself, but my colleagues are doing so. So that's one series, and there really are. There's a whole bunch of these, and it's really interesting to be able to go through them this way. I should also say that they have that Roberta made at the time these kind of wonderful scrapbook kind of binders. And this one is for 67 to 72, and they go, every couple of years, and there's like 4 or 5 of them. And they're really very comprehensive in terms of exhibition announcements and artist statements, photography, installation photography. So it's almost like, it's great because she basically provided us and future researchers with a kind of roadmap to the collection, so that even if you're not exactly sure what you're looking at in terms of the preparatory material, you can usually kind of go back and reconstruct and figure out which show it came from, which is great.
Jacob,
Yeah.
just a question. I think you touched on this, but could you just remind us about the size of the collection?
Oh, actually, I didn't mention it. It's about a little over 5 linear feet. It's these 5 gray boxes behind me, plus an oversized box. So it's a nice manageable size. And as I said, it's really a collection. Sometimes you get collections that are full of lots of personal materials, and this one has some really wonderful journals that are access restricted, which means that you have to get Roberta's permission to look at them. But they're really like amazingly detailed journals from the 1970s, and are really an incredible sort of account of the life of an artist, of a woman in the art world in the US, traveling throughout Europe, traveling elsewhere during that period. So for people who might be actually doing really serious research on her, those could be a really valuable resource. But other than those things, this is really like an artistic archive, which is something that we haven't, is not always the case, but it's doesn't have, it's really quite focused in that way. thought it was also nice. There's an envelope here of photographs of her earliest work. So she was living and working in Europe in the late 1960s, and these are what her these are her paintings at the time. And I was kind of loved to see what kind of art conceptual artists were making before they started making conceptual art. So there's one envelope of these, which are all from, I think these are all from 1968. So maybe a few of them predate that. And these are paintings that her first exhibition, her first solo show in Amsterdam, was a show of paintings. But then pretty quickly she sort of shifted gears and started making more sort of conceptually oriented drawings.
I have
There
a
are a lot of
question for probably a question for Roberta, but just, was she living in Amsterdam at the time?
I believe so. But
Roberta, if you don't mind chiming in.
There are also a lot of great photographs of a lot of Polaroids, a lot of things that were sort of taken as source material and then would find their way into other projects. These were all taken in Europe. There's this one's taken in London, Dusseldorf, Amsterdam, and there's a numbering system which I think has to do with page pagination for an artist book or something like that, because she also has made a lot of artist books, and the collection includes the kind of maquettes or dummies, the kind of handmade dummies of a lot of them, which is also really nice. I'll show a couple of those. But she made a lot of work using arrows over the years, and so that's you can also sort of trace the use of these different motifs through different projects. So this is in a there's an envelope here where you have like this is like gelatin silver prints of various road signs with arrows pointing in different directions. And these kind of find their way into a number of different projects. One of which is these. I'm not sure exactly what these are like, whether these are maquettes, but there are these kind of wonderful pieces where it says, this one says, where every answer is known, and here you have these road signs pointing, where every question is known. Oh, focus. Where every point of view is known, and where every obstacle is known. And these are sort of hand painted in gold, I guess gold pen or paint onto the photographs. And where everything is known again, you have this roundabout sign, which I love. And you can see on the back kind of how they're constructed. And then these, so this is an example where they find their way into an artist's book. And this is a kind of handmade Xeroxed version of this.
Josh is commenting that these are lovely.
Yeah, this is a really fun one. This also plays very much into my personal tastes as a historian and curator. But yeah, I've been having a very good time sorting through this kind of stuff.
Roberta said that she was living in Amsterdam at the time.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And there's a real humor to a lot of these. There's some, this kind of, secretly observing the movements of 32 pointless arrows. I mean, it's just, I also love the way that, that there really is a kind of self awareness, and it's kind of, they're quite funny. Sometimes, like this one says, an ascending arrow hiding part of a window pane. This one says, a futile attempt to hide an ascending arrow. So the play with language also, this is I don't think this was ever made to be exhibited, but this is like a piece that that I really cracked up when I came across this. It says, some pointless acts involved in the making of pointless acts. So here she says, rejecting 177 original photographs. There's the, the photo mat pieces, making 19 trips to the photographer to enlarge them, I guess, rejecting 90 blowups. And it's very, these are actual, this one is about to come off, so I have to be careful, but these are actual photo mat photographs of her making the piece using the photograph. It's very meta, which I thought was really great.
And I love that these show her beautiful penmanship.
I know, which is great, which is also great with the journals because they're actually legible, which is not always the case with people's personal journals.
Someone made to that note, someone made a comment that the collection looks to be well organized. Does that mean it's already been processed?
It has not been processed. It has actually not even been fully rehoused. I'm in the process of rehousing everything into archival folders and boxes and everything like that. So no, it hasn't been processed. It's organized because she kept, basically they're like manila folders by project. Sometimes many folders for one project. So it's well identified, which is great. Although it needs it needs to be rehoused so that the things are preserved and safe moving forward. There's another, she sort of also did a lot of installation pieces and works, and there's a lot of great sort of documentation of those projects. Also, I'll show a little bit of that. Meet me at camera 2. This is a piece again using arrows. This is an installation. This is an installation of the project at PS1 in 1977 that I showed the announcement card for earlier. This is 1 as 2 and more ascending and descending arrows. Yeah, tape 1977, tape and plastic letters on floor, photographs, installation PS1. We have the photographer. We have like the whole kind of all the relevant details. This is another piece from around the same time, which was installed in a pool at a college. What was the college? This one, oh yeah, CW Post College in Glenville, Long Island. This is Real Ascending and Descending Arrows 2. And this is great because we also have we have a whole folder of transparent graph paper transparencies of this kind of vellum graph paper with all of the preparatory drawings for this installation. So this is really great. Here's another one. I mean, this is like I was so happy when I opened this folder.
And are those, we can't quite read it. Are those just kind of descriptions?
It says, so yeah, so this one says illusion of a sloped plane. This is actually PS1 floor installation, partial view 1977, the surface experienced as space. It says arrows on floor planes are defined as rising and or falling according to perspective slants from several viewing positions indicated by verbal labels. An interplay between 2 and 3 dimensions results when the surface is experienced as space. A road in the distance may appear higher than the same road beneath our feet. In photographs, we assume that the floor is flat, though we experience it as receding in space. And it's sort of explaining this is a kind of explanatory drawing. And then there are some of these, like this one, this one here, which is for this swimming pool, is also like an actual layout of what the piece is. And there's a lot of some of these just talk about how with road signs, here's another one, like so this, how road signs with arrows are not identical to the directions they indicate in space. Road signs with arrows pointing up indicate straight ahead. Often signs with arrows are placed at angles or positions on the road so ambiguous to the driver that he or she cannot determine which of several directions to take. And so there are many of these sort of thinking about and I guess the pool provided a particularly interesting sort of surface on which to sort of play the things out because it actually is sloped itself. So you have like all of these different plays with perspectival distortion that were, you know, really fascinating to a lot of artists at the time. I mean, think about Jan Dibbett's corrections for perspectival distortion, and I think that these drawings and photos and installations very much, excuse me, I'll turn my camera back on, you know, are very much part of this conversation. And so I think that, you know, because she sort of chose to, you know, to absent herself from the art world, which I can understand, you know, maybe these works aren't as well known as they should be historically. And so I think it's really a great opportunity to recover. You know, she's had, you know, a number of exhibitions in recent years, which is great. There have been a couple of shows at a gallery called Minus Space in Brooklyn, here in New York. There was a show of her artist books at the Athenaeum Museum or Library in La Jolla, California, a few years ago. So these are, you know, there is interest in this kind of work and in sort of reevaluating things that maybe were a little bit left out of kind of dominant historical narratives. And this collection provides a lot of great material to do that. What else? There's also, you know, there are just like, there's really, all of this exists for almost every project. It's really kind of an embarrassment of riches in that way. I don't know if people have more questions. Here, I'll just show very quick. I'm not going to read from it, but like, you know, you can see this wonderful handwriting from one of these journals.
Will you show the front of what was?
Yeah, it's just it's just a journal.
Okay.
It says record on the front. If you can, I know the lighting isn't always the best. I can show there. Oh, please hold. See, this is kind of how things are currently. You know, they're in folders and portfolios, but this is just like a whole folder of amazing preliminary drawings. And there's just such great stuff in here. Focus, there we go. So these are like collaged elements of, you know, glued on lined paper onto sort of more heavy stock. And then this is written in pen. Dissension as part of a general horizontal or passive environment. There's another one. Dissension as a single exterior movement which affects only the exterior shape, not the dominant horizontal motion. Dissension as part of a general horizontal movement. So, you know, all of this work is really, you know, having to do with questions about knowability and paradox and perception and the relationship between perception and linguistic understanding and how those two things often, you know, they interplay and influence one another. This is environment determining the inner structure of the ascending flow. So, I mean, these are amazing to me.
Yes.
I think that these are really things that, like, you know, would be great, you know, to include in exhibitions, as well as for researchers to be able to see. Here's one. This is horizontal boundaries, and then she switches it to forces eroding vertically, and this one says done over. So there's also a lot of notes about having to redo things or, you know, kind of working things out along the way. this one says one portion of possibility exposed, revealing the presence of pointless arrows. And you can see this is it's a kind of, this is a collage. There's 2 sheets of paper here, or 2 note cards of different types.
Jacob, on that note, we have 2 questions for you. The first is, you mentioned just researchers. Do you have a timeline for when the collection will be processed and available?
Usually we have things processed, which means that, everything has been rehoused, and one of our archivists will have gone through everything and created a finding aid. Usually we're talking sort of 12 to 18 month timeline. COVID is still, we're still working through a kind of a backlog from everybody working remotely during COVID, but that's sort of the hope. But I should also say that if researchers are, if we do get requests from researchers, we do let people look at unprocessed collections in our reading room in DC. So we do sometimes have cases where someone really needs to be looking at something and it hasn't been processed yet. And so we'll send it to DC so people can do it there.
And then the last question, I know we have a few minutes left, but the last question is, how did the conversation about the papers with Roberta begin?
This is a quite common, as the conversation with Roberta actually began with my predecessor in this position, Annette Leddy. And Annette was also interested, and I had some great notes. At that time, Roberta decided not that she wanted to sort of, I don't know, it didn't happen, but there was a lot of interest. And so I had notes to go on when Roberta got in touch with me again. And luckily she lives only about 4 blocks from our office, so I scurried over there, and I was really I immediately saw the value in this. But that often conversations that we have with donors last for many years, and sometimes span multiple staff, sometimes chronologically, sometimes geographically.
And then just the last question, with 2 minutes left. The last question is just about the significance of this of the collection. You touched a little bit on that, but maybe if people are interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, I think, as I touched on earlier, I think that this is a significant collection, and that she's like, I think that this is really good work. As I think it was very well received and exhibited, and quite widely at the time that it was made. She had a lot of institutional shows, and and was represented by some of the sort of most serious galleries within this network of conceptual art. And she's in significant museum collections, but I think because of switching to a different career, didn't kind of, as art history was taking up this generation and writing the histories, she isn't always, she's not as prominent as she was actually at the time. And so I think that, as historians and curators, one of the major things that a lot of us are trying to do right now is revising the canon, in ways that allow in people who really were part of conversations and were excluded for whatever reason. I'm sure the fact that she was a woman didn't have,
Right.
It didn't have nothing to do with to have a double negative, had something to do with that as well. I've worked a lot on the Nancy Holt papers, and Nancy, who also showed with John Weber, had to struggle for years and years and years to get recognition. And so it's also a part of the kind of institutional sexism of the art world,
Right.
Starting to push back against.
Well, thank you for those final thoughts, and thank you so much for showing us this amazing collection. And the last thank you is to Roberta for the donation of this important collection, and for joining us today. I hope you guys enjoyed the program as much as I did, and we hope to see you in October. Thank you. Take care. Bye, everyone.